Well, this is the third time I'm going to try to make this video. It's 1:51 in the afternoon on Thursday, the 29th of October 2015. Valentino just ate some more of his cheese curd. No, he doesn't eat cheese curd. Ed of the North asked if he was eating cheese curd. He was eating a mixture of softened dry cat food. We soften it for him because he doesn't have any teeth in the back of his mouth. He doesn't have any molars. He only has incisors in front. Cats don't get caries like we do because they don't eat sweet stuff, but they do get some cats at least have a situation where their own antibodies destroy their teeth. It's an autoimmune disease. It isn't well understood, but it is common. It is relatively common. And the fortunate part of it is their gums harden up so that they can then go on eating normal food. He doesn't eat well if we don't soften his dry cat food, so we do that. And we give him some boiled chicken that he likes that adds some better flavor to it, of course. So he gets a good diet, and he just ate, and now he's digesting. This video is not about cats and their teeth or Valentino in particular, but actually about something that happened in 1969. Now, that's a long time ago, isn't it? That just occurred to me. That's 40 something years ago, 44 years ago or whatever. In any case, we moved into a new apartment at that time and immediately made friends with our neighbors there. A very nice couple that both worked for IBM, had lived in Fishkill, New York for a while, working for IBM, and then moved to Tübingen, where they would be working for IBM in Böblingen, near Stuttgart. And they were very kind and generous, and said one day that they were thinking about going to Turkey and whether we'd like to come with. Well, I was a graduate student earning very little money, and it would be financially very difficult for us. But in fact, they said they would pay for the trip. Basically, we could pay whatever we felt we could pay, but they would basically pay for it. So they wanted to go with us. That was very nice. And so we took a 9-week trip to Turkey. I had no thoughts about Turkey. I had a friend in high school who may watch this, actually, Engin. He called himself Turk in high school, and he came from Turkey. And that's about all I knew about Turkey was from him and some very naughty words that he taught Jim and me back in high school. And but it sounded very exciting. I had to look at a map at that time. I wasn't even sure where Turkey was. And so we bought a used, I think it was a 59 or something like that, Mercedes 230 sedan, 4-door sedan. It was the one that had those tail fins in back. I think it was probably 59 or something like that. And it was in very good condition, 2.3 liter 6-cylinder engine. And it had, the theoretical advantage of it was that it had a special suspension system, quite an interesting suspension system. The swing axles in the back had a kind of a pump attached to them. From the movement up and down, it would actually pump itself up. And I've never heard of this system before or since, but in any case, the idea was that the roads in Turkey were going to be very bad. In fact, the roads were probably just as good or better than many of them in Central Europe were. But we thought they would be, and in fact, we did travel on some roads that were very bad. However, the suspension system wasn't necessary, and didn't play a role in the thing. However, the 230 was the Mercedes was quite comfortable and had plenty of room for all of our gear. We were not going to be camping. We were going to be staying in bed and breakfasts and rooms wherever we could find one. And so we took off one day in end of September, I believe it was, in 1969. And we drove to southern Germany, to Bavaria, to Munich, and from Munich south to Innsbruck and through Austria, but not down into Italy, but rather over to the east into Serbia. And we drove through Serbia down to Zagreb, which was the capital of Serbia, and turned left, that is, turned east, and went to the Turkish border there in a town called Edirne. The drive-through Serbia, I keep wanting to say Croatia, it was Serbia though. The drive-through Serbia was one of the most horrific experiences in my life. It rained the whole drive, and in 2 hours we saw 200 accidents. The Serbs at that time drove in a very interesting way. They only passed when they could see someone was coming. And that's exactly what I'm saying, exactly the way it was. If they couldn't see, they wouldn't pass. But if they saw someone coming, they passed and played chicken, basically. Somebody had to do something, hit the brakes and pull over off the side of the road, or 200 accidents in 2 hours. Burning cars off the side of the road, tipped upside down, buses. I think we saw 6 or 7 buses that had crashed. I mean, these were all fresh crashes, and there were old crashes still. They couldn't remove the debris fast enough. Part of the problem apparently was that many of the cars that drove like that were party members. Ex-Yugoslavia at that time was, of course, communist, and the Communist Party members got cars apparently for free. They were Russian. Almost all of them were Russian Lada or other Russian cars, and they drove them like maniacs. It was really horrifying. Anyway, we got into Zagreb with some problems with the suspension system on the car, and I think they finally removed this hydraulic system that had been installed, and we drove on then to the Bulgarian border. And then going into Bulgaria, I mentioned our experience in the mountains with the bread in Bulgaria yesterday. We got into Bulgaria, stayed overnight, I believe, in the capital, which is Sofia, and then down to Edirne, where we stayed overnight also. Edirne is a little tiny part of Turkey that is still on the European continent. And the next morning we crossed the Bosporus into Turkey and spent a week in Istanbul, which was just amazing. It was just stunning. At the time, of course, Turkey was not a particularly well-known tourist country. There were very few non-Turks there. Most everyone was local, and they looked at us rather strangely, but very, very polite. And I must say the Turkish people were some of the friendliest and politest, and certainly some of the nicest hosts we ever had anywhere. We were just amazed at Istanbul with the mosques and the food and the smells and the women with huge. A man told us there, a number of Turks spoke German because they had actually worked in Germany as guest workers, which at the time it was very common for Turks to come to Germany to work. And they, so we often found people that spoke German, even way out in the desert, basically. And in any case, someone told us that that the second most important beast of burden in Turkey is the donkey, the first being the women. And we saw women with gigantic armoires, big cabinets on their backs, hunched over with a little boy. The woman had a string in her mouth, and the little boy would guide her by walking with the string, showing her where to go. I mean, these kind of things, they stick with you. You don't forget them. We were really amazed at some of the things we saw. The food was wonderful. Oh, we loved the food in Turkey. It was really good. And we crossed over then. We went from left Istanbul. We went straight across to Ankara, which is the capital, but kind of an artificial capital in the middle of the country. It's only there because it is in the middle of the country. And it was actually just a village before they turned it into the capital. We went up to a place called Bohatka, where the Hittites, I'm trying to think, I think 2,000 years before Christ, 4,000 years ago, had a city with 150,000 people. It's just ruins now. I mean, it's just, of course, 4,000 years later, they're just stones laying around, but you can still see where walls were. You can still see certain carvings. There's a famous lion's gate that at the time the little town of Bohatskoy was a village, actually, just a few people. And I guess the people took turns, as if a visitor did come, a tourist came, then the people took turns going there and showing them around, and of course collecting the little bakshish, the little money that they could get. I think they actually asked for a certain amount, which was just minimum. And the man spent all day with us walking through the ruins there. This was in early October, and we had snow that day. It's very the main part of Turkey is it's very high. It's almost, I think, 2,000 meters, and it's a desert basically, but not a sandy desert like the Sahara, but rather fine stones. And you see camels. You actually see camels running around, and there are nomads in tents. And we drove on all the way to Kayseri, and then from Kayseri east until we were asked not to drive any further because it was considered dangerous. We could see the Mount Ararat, where supposedly the Noah was supposed to have landed, and it was very exciting. Kayseri was very interesting. I was ill there. I got a fever. I had, like, I don't know, flu or cold or something, and there was only one doctor in the town. We stayed in the hotel. The hotel was just, it was local conditions, very poor. And they looked all over for the doctor because I had such a high fever. And it took hours, and they finally found him in the hotel we were in. He was sitting down in the lobby playing chess. In any case, he gave me some medicine, and I took 2 of the pills. I had a very high fever and was not coherent, but I knew in 3 different languages to say I didn't want any shots. I was afraid of getting hepatitis B or C or something, so I didn't want any shots. And he said, no, he wouldn't, in French. He spoke some French. He said he wouldn't give me any shots. He gave me some pills. And the next day I was out running around in the desert, and I was chasing a camel, and I just felt fantastic. And I took the pills. When I came back to Germany, I looked up because they were the pills, the boxes were all in Turkish. And well, I only took, I think, the pills for 6 days, so I didn't get completely hooked on them. But it was something that you wouldn't. It was just morphine. It was basically just pure morphine. And actually, it was opium. Is what what it was. But anyway, we drove from there south. I'm not going to tell you about the rest of the trip, really, because I want to get my slides out. I want to get my slides sorted if I ever get around to it. Then I'm going to show them to you, and I'm going to tell you about the trip. But I want to tell you about what happened. We drove through the Taurus Mountains, which is very exciting, I have to say. Very exciting. And when we got down to the south, we went to a little town. At the time, it was just a village called Side, S-I-D-E. And Side had one motel. We had, I think, called ahead and actually reserved rooms there. So we got our rooms, and it was very nice. And we asked the man how far we were from the ocean, and he said, it was night. It was dark, and it was night. And we asked him how far we were from the Mediterranean Sea, and he said, if you walk 5 steps forward, you'll have wet feet. The motel was right on the coast. We had a wonderful time there. We spent, I think, a week. We were kind of exhausted from our travels through the rest of Turkey, and we were glad to be able to rest on the beach there. And it was just beautiful. Food was exquisite. It was just wonderful. Very inexpensive, and it was wonderful. It's all changed now. Side is now a big tourist attraction with hundreds of hotels, but at the time it was just a village with one motel, and there's a ruins of a Greek amphitheater there, and you could actually walk around in it. And I have pictures of myself standing up there and down in front, trying to recite some Latin that I never really learned. In any case, we decided it was necessary to have the Mercedes serviced. I think we had driven already like 5,000 kilometers or something, and it was time to have the car serviced. So I was selected to drive to the nearest service station, and we had seen one coming in. It was very nice, very modern, and we had everything with. We had oil filter. We had the oil filter on the Mercedes was in a aluminum. What do you call it? Like a cup, an aluminum cup. Well, you've seen these things. Big diesel engines have them too. It has a bolt that goes through the middle, and the filter cartridge sits in this aluminum cup, and then it has a ring around the top. It has an annulus and a rubber O-ring that seals it. Well, it isn't an O-ring, it's a gasket, in any case, at the top. And this just bolts into the bottom of the engine somewhere. In any case, we had all that with us, so there was going to be no problem. I went to the service station there, and I explained as well as I could. Of course, here again, language. I showed the guy, I pointed the oil, and I let him know that we wanted the oil dropped out, drained from the car, and he understood. And he put the car up on the rack, on the lift, and he drained the oil, and I gave him the new oil filter, and I gave him the ring, and I thought it dawned on me finally what he was doing. He put the new gasket into the cup annulus at the top without taking the old gasket out, and he tightened it up as tight as he could with a wrench this long, and of course split the aluminum at the top of the cup. Oh man, I tell you, I was feeling very sick. I knew he was doing it, and I called out, no, but he went right on tightening it. And in any case, he looked at it and got on the telephone, and he called all around and finally gave me the telephone, and some guy spoke English at the Mercedes dealership in Istanbul, which is hundreds of miles away. And he said the Mercedes 230 had never been imported into Turkey, and they had none of these things. It would take at least 2 weeks to get one from from Stuttgart. So I stood there not knowing what to do. The filling station guy called a few more numbers, and all of a sudden a Vespa drove up in front of the filling station. And the guy indicated to me, the filling station attendant took the aluminum cup and put it in a plastic bag and handed it to me, and the guy on the Vespa said I should get on. Well, on the back of the Vespa, there were 2 amphoras of wine. I mean, we're talking about probably 30, 40 liters of wine in each one. So here I was hanging on the back of this Vespa with these 2 big wine amphora in front of me, sitting off on the sides of the Vespa like this. And we went tearing off. Oh, first I forgot about that. First he wanted me to ride with some guy with a donkey cart with wooden wheels. And I absolutely refused. I said I was not going to, because the next village was at least 5 miles away. And I mean, it would have, or 10 miles away. In any case, we wound up going to the next town on this Vespa. And the first thing we had to deliver the wine to the guests, to the restaurant where it was, for the people that ordered it. So I helped them carry these amphorae into the restaurant. They had holders where they put them in, and nobody spoke anything but Turkish. So I with the few words that I knew from my friend Turk, I knew I wasn't going to communicate in Turkish with them. So we got back on the Vespa and we rode into the next town, Antalya. And the guy told me to get off and take my cup and just stand there. And he went tearing off on his Vespa, leaving me standing out in the middle of nowhere. And 2 minutes later, I heard from behind me, sounds like you got a problem, in American English. I couldn't believe it. I turned around and there was this friendly-looking young man standing there, smiling at me. And he said, I hear you have some problem with your Mercedes. And I said, you're not kidding. And I took out this aluminum cup and showed it to him. Oh, yeah, he said, yeah, that's no good. Well, come with me. And I said, okay, I'll come with you, but tell me why you speak perfect English. And he laughed and he said, well, actually, I'm an American citizen. He left Turkey, joined the American Navy, became an American citizen and lived in San Diego, used all of the equipment to build up a diesel workshop for big marine diesel engines. And was there on the coast, he had his workshop there. He said, I cannot help you with this thing, but I know someone who can. And I said, well, this is crazy. Aluminum, at this time, you have to remember, this was 1969. Welding aluminum was not something that you normally did. Most people said, oh, you can't weld aluminum, and that's just the way it was. And so we walked through the town there into an area that looked really kind of seedy, and to a garage. And I tell you, I've never seen anything like this. He opened the door on this garage, and I looked in, and the floor, well, actually the floor was 2 feet high in junk. It was just junk. There was rusty metal, it was just a mess. Everything was just thrown around in there. There were rusty tools and car parts and old refrigerators and all kinds of stuff. And there was this dirty-looking man and a young boy in there. And this dirty-looking man used words that I understood, having learned from Turk. Some very, very naughty words. He swore the whole time. There wasn't one sentence, I guess, that he could say without using swear words. It was like on Facebook. But in any case, he took this cup and looked at it, and he swore, and it was just, and I thought, oh, this is stupid. This is just crazy. What am I doing here? But this man with the diesel workshop seemed so certain it was going to be all right that I just accepted it. Well, I had no choice. I really had no choice. This dirty-looking character had a huge vise. I'm not kidding. It was probably 2.5, 3 feet long, with a big handle on it, and he would yell with swear words at this young boy that was there to get him things. And so the young boy would come running with this and that, and he finally the boy came with a piece of steel. I don't know about this long and thin, and this the mechanic put a round bar in his vise and got a hammer with a broken off handle, but it just had enough handle that he could hit with it. And he started hammering on this piece of steel, and I couldn't believe my eyes. In 5 minutes, he had turned this straight piece of steel into a circle, a geometric circle. And he held it up to the cup, and it was just the same diameter as would have gone into this thing, except it was too long. So he yelled at this little boy to get him a saw, and he came back with a saw. I think just a blade, just a metal saw blade. And he sawed this piece of thing up, and he bent it a little more, and it fit right into the cup. So he protected the annulus, this ring. By the way, I was careful to save the rubber gasket. I threw the old one away and kept the new one. He put this steel ring into the aluminum cup, and then he put this aluminum cup in this huge vise, and he tightened the vise up, and I thought he's going to crush the cup for sure, but he didn't. And then he did something. I'm sorry this is so long, but there's no way I can tell it short. He went over to a 55-gallon steel oil drum that had a hose coming out of the top of it, and it had one of those clamp rings around the top. And he opened that drum up, and he reached into an old wooden box and came out with a handful of what I realized was carbide. And he threw the carbide in there, slammed the lid down on top, put the ring on, and he stood there smoking a cigarette, which he had made himself, of course. And I looked at the drum, and the drum was actually swelling. It was actually expanding. And I looked at no, I didn't look at the other guy. The other guy had left in the meantime, so I was there. And I was sure this drum was going to explode and kill us all. He did have an oxygen bottle. It was laying on the floor, and it had a hose attached to it, and he had an old, just an absolutely unbelievably old, you wouldn't even recognize it as a acetylene torch. But he was generating acetylene in this 55-gallon drum with the carbide in there. He turned the valves on, lit this torch. I couldn't believe it that it worked, but it did. It worked fine, and he had a good flame. He had a good, he very carefully adjusted the flame. And then he swore at this poor little boy and said something, and the little boy went over looking and looking, and finally the guy put the torch down, and he went over to a refrigerator that was on the wall, and he took his hammer and broke the aluminum handle off the refrigerator. I thought he completely lost his mind. He came back, and he began with his torch to melt the aluminum from that handle onto the cup, the oil filter cup. And he melted it until he had a sausage around the outside of the cup. It was probably 1.5 centimeters thick. And I thought, that can't work because there isn't room on the engine for that. But the whole time I was underestimating him, obviously. He tightened after he was done welding, he released the pressure in the drum, by the way, by opening a valve, and it stunk, of course, from acetylene, with him smoking a cigarette. And he then reached down on the floor and found a file, which was probably 2.5 feet long, this wide, thick, and real coarse, and he started filing on this cup. And he'd take the cup out, tighten the vise again, and then file it again until he had filed it down to just maybe 2 millimeters more than the original thickness of the cup. In the meantime, the other guy came back, the diesel mechanic, and the guy took the cup out of the vise, pulled the metal ring out of it, got the gasket from me, put the gasket in and checked that it was all going to fit fine and everything, gave it to me, and then they started talking, and it sounded like they were fighting. And all of a sudden, everything was quiet, and the guy said, all right, pay him now. The diesel mechanic said, I should pay the guy now about 5 D-Mark, Deutsche Mark, which was at the time about $1.50. I said, I'll pay him $10. No, he said, I just bickered with him, and I got the price down to $1.50. You pay him the $1.50. So I paid him the equivalent of $1.50 for these 2 hours of work that he did. And we went, he and the diesel mechanic and I went off and drank tea. And a couple of minutes later, the guy on the Vespa came riding up, and I got on the back of it with my cup in my plastic bag, and I went to the filling station. The guy bolted it onto the car, filled it with oil, and I drove off. It was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. I'm not sure there isn't some kind of, I am sure there is some kind of intervention. I will say that. I really do believe that. There's no doubt about it. Not just in regard to this story, but to my life in general. Somebody intervened. And it worked. It's just stunning. I mean, it happened exactly like I told it. Maybe there were more details that might have even been more amazing. But in fact, that's what I remember, whatever it's been 40 years later. That car, when we drove it home, we drove it all the way back to Germany, 2,000, 3,000 miles, whatever it was. Or kilometers, and we came back to Germany with the car, and we kept it for, I think, a year afterwards. Then the two families, we drove it off and on if our car was broken, why we drove it, and if their car was in the workshop, they drove it. And finally, we sold the car to a friend of ours. We sold it to a friend of ours, and she drove that car for 3 years more. And I said, "Have you never replaced that aluminum cup for the oil filter?" And she said, "No, it's never leaked. It's always been fine." So in 33 minutes, it's taken me to tell, you now know how to repair a broken oil filter cup on a Mercedes 230 if you're ever in Turkey. I doubt, probably today I don't know, maybe there are still people who could do this kind of thing. The man was a genius in his own right. He was just, he was a genius. And the diesel mechanic told me too some of the things that they had done there. He said he had an old Jeep, and the pistons had burned out, or it burned, or a valve had gone through the piston or something. And to get a piston from the States would have cost more than the Jeep had cost altogether. So he took a piston from an old Studebaker and actually turned it down and cut the rings and fitted the gudgeon pin, the piston pin, and basically just manufactured a piston. And the Jeep was still running. So there you are. That's my story about the Mercedes in Turkey. Love Turkey, beautiful country, lovely people. Thank you very much for listening to this long story, and I hope it's been entertaining. Valentino seemed to find it rather boring, but I guess that's understandable. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks for watching for subscribing, for commenting, and for your videos that you put out.